Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Hub Scale podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Yogita, the CEO and founder of Invi. So, thank you for joining me today, Yogita. Today, we'll be discussing secure by design in the cloud. So, Yogita, please give us a bit of an introduction and a bit of a background to yourself for those who don't already know you.
Well, first, thank you for having me on the podcast. I have been in cybersecurity for over 25 years. I'm dating myself now, from 1996 onwards, which is way before it was called cybersecurity, way before a lot of terms were coined, or even the importance of security was understood. So we had to, in those days, educate the CIOs and the business basically on why security. Today they ask us, just tell us how to do it. We know this has to be done. How to do it and how to do it better, faster, cheaper, right? Than ever before. So that is that's where we have come, yeah, today. So I'm very happy to be here. I have been with Ernst& Young, Oracle, head of security multiple times in the process, and now the founder. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, thank you, and thanks for that introduction. Obviously, a true veteran in the cyber space. So, I guess talk to us a little bit, if you can, around kind of the work you guys do at Invi.
At Invigrid, we are building a no-code
Mm,
platform for secure by design cloud provisioning and management.
mm,
So it's an orchestration platform. It's a unified end-to-end platform that brings different silo teams together. So whether it's the architects, cloud operations, cloud security, it brings all of them together, which is what we need to build a secure uh, cloud infrastructure from day zero. Audit ready, compliant, secure infrastructure.
Perfect. So I guess that kind of leads on quite nicely to the topic of the conversation today, which is secure by design in the cloud. So, first of all, it'd be good if you could explain to us, give us a bit of a definition. What do we mean by secure by design?
Actually, that's a very important question, right? Because to a lot of people, it means a lot of different things. And there is one predominant commonly held definition. I'll talk about all of that, right? But let's talk about what is the state of security today, right?
Mm,
Security most of the time, and why secure by design, why this has suddenly become into prominence. So the state of security today is that it is very reactive.
mm,
In my 25 years, we have so many tools at our disposal, but yet the breaches are increasing, correct? And that's because most of these tools are detection oriented. They help us find vulnerabilities. They are amazing in terms of giving visibility, observability for vulnerabilities, threat management, and misconfigurations as well, correct? So, because finally, it's all about vulnerabilities, software vulnerabilities, or misconfigurations, two broad areas, right? Outside of social engineering, uh, on how you can get hacked. So, but all these tools and entire security community industry is very hyper focused on detection, right? What needs to happen is you need to bake security in when the code is written, when the infrastructure is built, when the system is built. That's when you need to bake security in. And that is secure by design. That needs a secure by design approach to everything. Right? And unfortunately, so let's take an example. I mean, examples help very well, right? So let's take, even in the construction, when we build a house, the architects are drawing up your architecture diagram. Same thing with cloud architects or any infrastructure or any architecture, right? Software architecture as well. So you are drawing up your diagrams, and imagine now if in that you place a window near the door. Someone can easily smash that window and unlock your door. What good is the lock on the door? So now you designed it incorrectly. So now to mitigate that, right, you found this issue after the whole house was built. what is the use? Now, to mitigate that threat, right, you can't fix it until you break down the house, right? Imagine how expensive that is. Now, on top of that, you suppose you want to mitigate it, then what would you do? You would hire a security guard outside the door. You might place cameras. You have to continuously monitor that. What if the guard is sick? You have a backup guard, right? So now you have ended up spending so much money when it would have been so much easier if you would have designed it right. That is the concept of secure by design. It makes, and I want to give you another example now. And let's take, I think it's Veracode's State of Software Security Report 2023, which has about a third of the software that is put into production at the time it is put into production already has bugs. Okay, a third. And in the first 5 years, almost 70% will end up having a bug and a vulnerability. So imagine if we would have built our airplanes like that, if we would have constructed our bridges like that, would we trust it? And now we are going to allow software to control our cars. I mean, it's times come, we better think about security by design.
So that's interesting. You kind of just shed a light on, I guess, the cyber industry as a whole, then just the reactive nature. And from the sound of things, if I'm kind of inferring correctly from this, secure by design is just a much more proactive approach to security. And no doubt that's probably going to upset a lot of these kind of successful cyber vendors out there that do sort of rely on this reactive sort of response. So talk to me around, obviously you've been in the cybersecurity space, you've seen all this, and I'm sure you've been on the end of being a firefighter, putting out these sort of fires, dealing on the instant response side of things, that reactive nature. Talk to me around like the sort of the origins and of secure by design, this sort of approach and this sort of methodology.
Yeah. So first, let me tell you that reaction, I often get that reaction about the other cyber vendors. So I want to tell you, it's not going to go away. You will need the detect controls. It's not going to go away because, there is drift. There's always changes. You may modify how, how things work. Weather also might have, environment might have an impact on things, right? So your configurations might change, code might change. So you do need continuous monitoring detection, correct? But a lot is saved. A lot of fixing and remediation is saved if you do it day zero compliant. Now, origins, right? So these examples themselves resulted into the origins. Like, what is the root of this problem? How do we get to the root cause of this problem? And for those of us who understand controls and risks and how risks are introduced and business processes, we know very well how risks are introduced into the system. It is not the security team who's building the system. It is not the security team who's writing the code. It is the CTO organization, the engineering teams writing the code. It is the CIO organizations, the operations team, which is building that infrastructure. Correct? So they need to be skilled. They need to be trained on security. Very often, and not just trained, but they have to be incentivized into security, right? So what is the incentive for a CTO or an engineer? They want to build the coolest feature, the next coolest feature, right? They are measured on how many features are out there. Because, hey, I mean, think about it. It's right, correct? If the features and the product is not out, there's no revenue. There's no sale. There's no revenue. There's no business. What are you going to protect? What are you going to, right? Simple. So how do we get them who are absolutely incentivized in shipping that product out, keeping business agile, into thinking about security? That is how, so if you understand how that risk is introduced, because they are going at speed, 100 miles an hour, correct? You have to ship that product, get the business, provision that infra, get the business to go to market and generate revenue. They're talking speed, you're talking security, which is usually has the tendency of slow down, think through the process, right? So let's wait about. So how are you going to marry that? So that understanding the root cause is very important in building or engineering a secure by design approach within your security for your security program, because you're going to need their buy-in and the business buy-in. You have to show that you are a value driver. It's valuable to the company to think about it at that time, at that design phase, when they are coding, when they are building that system, provisioning that infrastructure, and so on.
So it sounds like secure by design, as much as it's a kind of a proactive methodology or a proactive approach to baking security in and proactive approach to security, it's also a good approach for building security culturally within an organization as well. And presumably, when you have champions in kind of different teams where you don't typically find them, as you mentioned, the engineering teams, the CTO teams, when you have those sort of cyber champions, for want of a better phrase, across different areas of the organization, I guess naturally you're going to get more buy-in from a senior level because you've got more people, um, I guess, advocating and championing good security practices, right? I'm interested, as you mentioned there, the sort of disconnect or the friction between sort of engineering teams and their agendas, their goals of shipping a product, the coolest product, the best features, and as quickly as possible, and security, which is a bit more slower, bit more diligent, bit more, we need to do this right, we can't be cutting corners. What do you find the kind of the biggest challenges in trying to get companies to adopt this approach and this sort of methodology then?
Things are changing.
Mm,
Things are changing because the number of hacks and the extent of damage that these hacks
mm,
are doing to the companies, with terabytes of data being lost.
mm,
In let's look at the latest, healthcare hack that that is really shutting down care
mm,
in a lot of places. So things are changing, right? So people are becoming more aware. People are beginning to realize that they need to think about security upfront. So it's a good time to actually introduce something like secure by design. And even merrier if if you can show speed with secure by design,
mm.
correct? And we will talk about that more as we progress. I'll, yeah, give some examples, because
Yeah.
if you really, for that adoption to really take, you will have to have both the agility with the security.
And I guess back to the whole thing about it being a cultural change as well. Naturally, cultural change isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's not going to be as sort of responsive as maybe tech teams can, you know, follow a new trajectory or follow a new path and a new, security mindset. Culturally, things do take longer to change. So I'm interested in I spoke to a lot of people in kind of the OT, the IoT space, the need for kind of securing IoT, and they've spoken about secure by design as it kind of pertains to IoT and physical security. I'm interested in understanding the specific kind of needs in the cloud space. What does secure by design mean for cloud?
Hmm. Yeah, that's another interesting topic, right? IT, OT, cloud. So, when it comes to cloud, there are two things again, correct? Again, it's the workload or the applications. That's your software that is sitting on the cloud, and there is the infrastructure of the cloud on which your workloads are sitting, correct? Broadly speaking, two primary things, right? Your functional apps and the infra on which it is running. And all of it is and cloud is nothing but so let's understand good old days. To understand cloud, you have to go back to good old days, right? In good old days, how did you ran your application code on the server, maybe in a room, in a machine, in your office somewhere, correct? Then came, oh, you don't have to build your own servers and networks within your office building somewhere, and you can rent out the space in our data centers. So they give you the power, the cooling, the physical security, everything. You just buy the servers, rack and stack them, and network them, right? Then everything started getting virtualized and software defined compute, software defined networking, software defined storage. And that's how, oh, you don't even have to rent a physical space. We are doing all of that. All you do is just go and click here and get a software defined server. You don't even have to buy a server and rack and stack it and hook it up and network it in your data center. So in those, the data, if you have your own data centers, that is what we call now as on-prem. And when you rent it in a from one of the hyperscalers, AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, that's your cloud environment, right? So it's all software defined. You get it at the click. You don't have to buy a server. You rent it, right? So it's like renting a house. You don't have to buy it. You initially you built your own houses, then you bought your houses, and now you are renting. So you went from capex to opex
Mm.
for your infrastructure. Now, IT and OT and all of that, right? Those are all, say, a medical device or any other sensors, even those, if they're sending data to a centralized location, they probably are sending it to some server in your on-prem data center or the rented server in a cloud, right? If they're connected. If they're not connected, different story.
Sure, sure. That's interesting. That makes sense. And I don't
Ah,
know how it ties in, and I guess how it
yeah,
relates.
to
But
security by design. Let me add.
I was going to ask that, and there was a follow-on question as well. But yeah, please.
Yes. So even so the cloud providers have there's a concept of shared responsibility, correct? So those who have built that house and have bought who own the house, they have provided, or the cloud, they have provided for certain security measures already, correct? The physical security is they have taken care of it. You don't have to bother about it. They are also providing you certain tools for security. They're providing you different levels of encryption, different, for data at rest, data in transit, different kinds of firewalling system, and they're providing you everything. Your responsibility is to lock that door in the cloud, right? You have to lock the you have to enable that camera and start using it, camera systems. So it's a shared responsibility model that you have to configure, right? So when you rent that server, when you in the cloud, when you or rent that click and get a server, click and get a network, right? That's what I mean by rent that server. You have to configure that, right? It's still your job. They have, and that when you rent it, when you click it, that's when you configure it. That is when you're doing secure by design for cloud infrastructure, right? Now, for workloads in the cloud, you have to do secure by design for the software. So as you write your code, you are essentially doing secure by designing at the design stage itself, at the coding stage itself, you're following security best practices, secure coding SDLC practices, right? And that workload then sits on the cloud. So it's both the workloads as well as the infrastructure as you build up the servers and networks in the cloud. Shared responsibility. You think that time when you configure. Because once you have configured all the architecture required for your workload to run, and if you haven't thought about security by design, then because one architecture for a very simple, even a Web 2 tier application, right, requires 20 to 25 components. All of those and all your compliance requirements have to be translated into that low-level configuration requirements. And that is something that you have to do when you are building that cloud infrastructure. That's secure by design for
Right.
cloud.
Understood. Well, I appreciate that insight. I think I've got my head around it a bit more now. And I was interested in what I said the follow-on question was going to be. I've heard a lot of talk over, well, particularly like the last couple of years, where around zero trust and companies saying, well, I've implemented zero trust, and particularly when I've had some of the people from the OT world, kind of joking about, how zero trust been implemented in, I don't know, a manufacturing site, like a utilities site, for example, and then there's the latest MFA has been installed, and all of a sudden the engineers who are wearing PPE, you know, in order to get through the kind of MFA and use the MFA, they need to be taken off their PPE and whatnot. So inherently, there's a kind of a disconnect or a lack of understanding from the IT side what the OT sort of requirements are. Just thinking about zero trust for a second as a kind of a competing like methodology or approach, can you help explain to me more than anything zero trust and how that's sort of different or opposed to secure by design?
Actually, it's zero trust is an approach, it's a concept.
Right.
And honestly, honestly, for all of us in security, we have kind of, become so paranoid that zero trust all the time,
Mm,
right?
sure.
We're paranoid by default. It's a side effect of the profession, right?
Yeah.
So as a concept, it just means that um, you are always going to verify the identity of the person who is accessing your resources, correct? So let's step back a little bit, even before that, right? Because that's also one aspect of zero trust, correct? Because there is zero trust network access, there is zero trust architecture, so many different zero trust concepts, correct? And but let's step back a little bit. Today, IT, OT, remote workers, with COVID, everyone went remote, and now remote is a lot of times the first choice in a lot of companies, correct? So
Sure.
plus there are SaaS applications. In again, those good old days when you had your own data centers, right? You had a perimeter. You had a perimeter, physical perimeter, as well as a logical perimeter. Everyone could access the servers in that one location through that strong DMZ perimeter firewall. You had everything. Inside, everything was trusted. It might be a little mushy. It was like an M&M, right? Hard on the outside, inside a little mushy, correct? So we used to call that trust but verify. Everyone inside is trusted, and we'll verify it later. It's all okay. Now what has happened? You could just VPN in, yeah, you're fully trusted inside. Now what has happened is this complexity of the infrastructure has increased. Now there are sensors everywhere, there are SaaS applications, there's not even a centralized kind of CIO organizations in a lot of places. The CTOs and the engineering teams are managing their own infrastructure. Cloud, we call it DevOps and cloud ops. The other business units are also having their own SaaS applications. So suddenly there's a lot of shadow IT. We call it shadow IT, right? So suddenly there is the discipline of in the CIO organization is now we are starting to expect that everywhere in all the different business units. Correct? So the complexity has increased. As a result, even the breaches have increased because now not everybody is trained and skilled in security, but they want that cool application out there, right? To compete, to innovate, and so they're going to get it. Business is going to approve it. So now, how do you make sure? How do you wrap your handle around? Plus, there is cloud, the hyperscalers that businesses will be using, SaaS applications, cloud, remote workers. All this complexity meant you had to have a method of now there's no longer that perimeter. So there's no way of knowing who you can trust, correct? So now, okay, let's just make sure that these are our resources. Let's identify our resources wherever they are. And anytime anybody is accessing that resource from anywhere, we will verify them. So in fact, even in the data center network perimetered firewall world, the firewalls had used to do implicit deny. There was an implicit deny at that gate, right? So now that same concept we have said we were going to do for accessing any resource, not just for entering into your, perimetered data center and all this. But we are going to do it every time a resource is accessed. So zero trust, you prove every time you're accessing any resources that are so decentralized and scattered. And ZTNA concept. So now ZTNA require, sorry, not ZTNA, the zero trust concept, correct? And so it can be with ZTNA solutions for access. It can be a zero trust architecture approach, right? So every time, whether you're building a system, whether you're building out the clouds, right? Cloud environments or cloud infrastructure. So it's a concept or an approach. It can be even, okay, I'm going to isolate everything and sandbox everything and micro-segment everything, all of that is a part of your zero trust architecture. So zero trust as a concept of making sure that every access request to any resource that I want, that is sensitive and I want to hold dear, I'm going to, make sure I'm verifying the identity of the person. Yeah. And continuously monitoring every session. So now that obviously, if you look at how zero trust and secure by design, right? Now your question is whether it is zero trust, whether it is defense in depth, correct? These are all approaches within the whole security by design philosophy.
Right.
So when I design my system, whether it's the cloud or an application sitting in the cloud, when I design that, I have to use these approaches, right? Could be a zero trust approach, a defense in depth approach, whatever I use. So it's still the concept of these three concepts go together very well.
Understood. So I think that I really appreciate it because from my understanding before, I've heard a bunch of people said, oh, we're zero trust with this, with that, whatever, as if it was kind of a carte blanche, that's going to protect us. We're secure. And it sounds like that's one component, one concept and approach to improving security, specifically through controlling who can access and just as default denying access until verified. So I can understand now why that's improving security. It reduces risk because everyone's getting verified. But as a standalone concept, it's not going to help you
Yes,
achieve
correct.
full security then. Okay,
Exactly.
that makes sense. And I was thinking back to what you're talking about at the start of the podcast, how cybersecurity itself is very reactive. And I appreciate you giving me that insight there to zero trust, because I think it's interesting. Obviously, we met at RSA, and I think there's a lot of kind of like buzz phrases and a lot of kind of things people focus on. And I think particularly as we've discussed previously as well, in the security team, security folks know what's important. I think sometimes at the other areas of the organization, some of these concepts like zero trust might get bought into, or people think I've got visibility into my OT or my IT network now. I know where the issues are, and then it's about, well, actually, no, we need to do remediation. So my question is around secure by design. What are the main challenges do you think in getting companies to adopt a secure by design methodology?
Oh my gosh. Right. So
$1 million question.
yes, that's the $1 million question, right? So, and so one thing, right? Remember we mentioned that who is building the systems? Who's writing the code? Who's building that system, whether it's cloud or otherwise, right? It's the operations teams, the engineering teams, they are building the systems.
Right.
So for years together, we have given them best practices, security as a community, given them best practices, given them hardening guides, given them all these tools like, hey, now there is a ZTNA tool for defense in depth, do firewall, do, all these layers of solutions for defense in depth. But unless they are trained, correct? Unless they have two things they need, right? For anything. And they, in the sense, we need as a company, as an enterprise, anyone, because we are all in this together, we are protecting them. So in addition to the culture is expertise and automation, correct? You have to empower everybody with the necessary security skill sets. Now, security teams are so resource thin already, resource strapped, correct? Now, if you ask the operations team, and they'll just dump you they'll dump you the infrastructure as code, for example, for cloud infrastructure. Where does the security team have the time to go through and review that infrastructure as code? Correct? while they are building the system. It's a very resource thin because it's a cost, it's considered the cost center already. So how are we going to train every person on security? Correct? That's one. Then remember we talked about incentives. We have to get the feature out first. Without the feature, there's no revenue, there's no business. What are you projecting? Correct? So how are we going to empower them with automation? So unless these two things happen, in addition to the culture and the top-down tone at the top and approach and all of that, the expertise, training and at their fingertips, so making it very easy for them and hyper automating it, the heck out of it, right? Those two things are needed to make secure by design a reality. And until we do that, and the more we start doing that, hopefully Gartner will create a hype cycle or make it a part of a hype cycle for and until that, it becomes big, all vendors start talking about it. This podcast is great. Uh, and yeah, because when we do that, when we provide that expertise at their fingertips and hyper automated, that's when we make it in line or align it with the business need for agility. When we align it to the business need for agility, security becomes a value driver, not a tax. Because then now they can ship that feature, ship that product out, get the system up and running fast and secure at the same time. Until that happens, it's going to be difficult. So that is where I think, companies like us, Invigrid, that is what we are trying our best to do. A little bit plug here, but I think that's the biggest, until we do those two things and we align ourselves with business. And it is, in fact, the way to align yourself to business. In fact, if you do secure by design, you are a value driver. If secure by design with this hyper automation, you automatically become a value driver for the business. Otherwise, you are still reactionary and still attacks. And still everybody is avoiding you and say, oh, wait, you're stopping us, you're slowing us down. If you can do it with hyperautomation so that they are not slowed down, but in fact can now, by virtue of the fact that they are not just fast, but also secure, they can sign deals faster because they're audit ready and compliant day zero. They can show zero issues. It suddenly starts making business sense. And that's actually what we do when we talk to our customers and we say, this is your ROI.
That's interesting. I think it's such an important kind of concept, that communicating ROI to companies. I know, linking back to kind of OT and IoT, when I've spoken to people there, one of my previous guests had on, Ellen, was talking about IoT security, and she told me about the cyber trust mark that's coming out. So essentially, secure by design IoT devices will have this trust mark on them, and in time, devices that have this trust mark on them will be seen kind of more favorably than ones bought off the shelf from Walmart that may not have the same cyber trust. Not just saying Walmart, but some cheaper products that aside, the trust mark aside, companies would naturally opt for the cheaper option. With the trust mark, it's interesting how insurance can tie into that as well. From my understanding, with insurance and insurance premiums, particularly around kind of the manufacturing space and companies that have a lot of IoT and OT devices, if they can prove and kind of let auditors come in and see their environment and seeing that their IoT devices are all cyber trust mark certified or stamped, in terms their premiums will be less because their risk will inherently be less. From an IT standpoint, looking at cloud, what incentives are there going to be for business? You talked about that kind of hyper automation, and maybe it's something a bit of a slower burn. Further down the line, companies will realize the value in being able to be kind of audit ready immediately. But are there kind of any more immediate returns on investment for companies that are considering adopting secure by design?
The immediate benefit is that you have shipped your product, still continue to ship your product as fast as you did before, right? And now you can sign deals faster because you're secure. So you will start seeing that immediate effect on the business that you start getting in. Your insurance premium, as you said, can go down, right? And I think this has given us a good nudge with Secure by Design initiative that they kicked off in
Yeah.
April 2020. So some of those are becoming good incentives for being secure by design, though it's still focused on software versus, the infrastructure. So infrastructure is a part of it. They do talk about uh, deploying, not just building within the initiative. So that's a good thing. So yeah, and we need to I think that's the ROI. The
Mm,
immediate ROI is the
sure.
fact that they can now ship their products, but also sign deals fast. It's a productivity gain. Now they are going to the mundane tasks, the error-prone tasks of actual coding. If we can hyper automate that with security baked in, right? Now, suddenly your operations teams, just like your developers writing code with the help of Copilot, your operations team, as they're building their systems and cloud infrastructure out, will suddenly start seeing, oh my God, now I can focus on more higher order tasks rather than the mundane task of, figuring every little configuration. That is what that hyper automation with Secure by Design will do. And they would have met all compliance requirements. No more auditors, on their neck trying to uh, get every configuration changed. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's a big benefit that CIOs, CTOs, CEOs alike can all sort of agree with that keeping the auditors away or at bay is definitely going to be an appealing prospect to them. So I'm sure that's a good selling point for them.
Yes, yes. But of course, the immediate one, as you asked me, is exactly a ship the product, right? But I can also get this deal signed because there is also that gap between, yeah, I could ship the product, but can I sell it? Everybody's asking for your, SOC 2 certification, you can say, yeah, we follow secure by design practices. And I wish there was like a cyber trust mark for the IT and OT devices. Maybe we can have for your cloud infrastructure, like, hey,
Well, that's
we'll
it. I
call it.
forgot. I forgot to actually ask the question, but yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was sort of inferring from what I'd heard on the OT side of things that if we could kind of bring that in, and you know, presumably from a company perspective as well, you're mentioning all the issues of code going out 30%, I believe you said already has got bugs in it, 70% within the first 3 years. Presumably with the secure by design as well, you're going to be saving a lot of cost, but also you're going to be saving yourself a lot of kind of reputational loss from shipping products that then turn out to be buggy and require patches uh, and all these sort of fixes further down the line. So be interesting if we could get that rubber stamp on there and people think, well, if I buy this product, might be at a slight premium, maybe over another product, but this means I'm going to have less issues further down the line, and security is of kind of paramount importance.
Yeah. Hopefully, it is baked in such a way that the tax with hyper automation is just automatic. The idea is that it just
Sure,
has to be baked in, without additional tax in it. So $10 product doesn't really become $20, right?
sure.
So yeah, that's the goal.
Perfect. Well, look, we've covered a lot in this podcast, and I guess for people that are kind of interested in finding out more from you, Yogita, more about your kind of services, what your business do, what's the best kind of method of people reaching out to you to learn more?
Of course, on our website, uh, that's a great way. We have a form, or my email address, LinkedIn, all the regular normal ways.
Perfect. I can include all that we will discuss afterwards, and I can include all that so that people can contact you. Is there anything you wanted to kind of leave the audience with? Any kind of take home things you wanted to mention?
Yeah, it is time. It is time to think about security on a first principles basis, root cause of the issues we are seeing. first principles, more on, it's not about, we are over-engineering security. What we need to do is re-engineer security from ground up. And that is secure by design.
Sure.
Think at the time the app is written, the system is built, and you will save a lot of money down the road. Yeah, the ROI is very clear. So re-engineer, not over-engineer it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Look, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast. I've learned a lot, and hopefully I'm sure the listeners will do as well. I really appreciate your time, Yogita.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.